Welcome to Underdog Rising with your host, Wade Posehn, where we ignite your journey from humble beginnings to greatness through inspiring tales of top executives and entrepreneurs. Welcome to this episode of Underdog Rising. Today we have Tori Samuel, President at Cognitive Wealth Management. Tori, thank you for being with us.
Hey, pleasure. Glad to be here.
Perfect. So we're going to jump into a quick fire round. What is one habit that has significantly improved your productivity?
Definitely time blocking, just understanding what I need to do every day and being able to prioritize, honestly, everything in my day so that when the unexpected happens, I know what I can just pass off to the next day,
That's incredible. I like that. What is the best piece of career advice you have ever received?
Anxiety in business, it's always going to be there. No matter how much you scale, how much you grow, it just looks a lot different the more that you grow, but there's always going to be ups and downs. And the best way to alleviate that anxiety is through activity. Keep taking steps forward because that's really anxiety, something that can just freeze you. You're right. It can stop you to the core. You can't let that happen if you're continuing to want to grow,
I appreciate you sharing that because I think the younger generation definitely needs to know that because sometimes they can get caught up in anxiety because everything's relatively new to them, right? What's the most important quality to have in finance?
I think that a lot of people in finance, especially in my role in wealth management, you think about being an expert in investments or insurance, whatever it might be, but that's expected. I think that the best quality you can have is to be personable and have the ability to have strong relationships because ultimately this is a relationship business.
So spot on. What's one thing that you wish you knew when you started your career?
I think that you could have the best product or investment or plan in the world. But without understanding an individual or a person's business goals or life goals, what's important to them, and being able to prioritize those goals in line with what you're offering, they're not gonna care what you have to offer.
These are so impactful. I appreciate you sharing these. What's one thing that you do every day to stay organized?
I'm going to have to go back to time blocking, to be honest. I think that earlier in my career, I was always thinking about what I needed to do next or who I needed to call, who I needed to reach out to, follow up with proper workflows in place, proper systems, especially with time blocking as kind of the foundation. My schedule tells me what I need to do. I don't need to think about it, and it saves so much time day to day.
Saves you a lot of mental energy as well, to put towards other things instead of having to decide, what do I have to do next? Who has been your biggest professional influence?
Yeah, I think I probably have two, to be honest. I'll give them equal parts, and probably one wouldn't work without the other. One being my therapist. I think that we go through so much in life, and from childhood to where we are today, having someone that you can trust to talk through those things, understand yourself. I know for myself, once I understood where the root of my feelings or emotions were coming from, it gave me more freedom to be open, not just to my clients, but to my wife, who's number 2 on that list, right? And I think that just exponentially helped me grow professionally.
Very powerful. And I think in this day and age where mental health is where it currently is, that's extremely important. And I think that the trust factor supersedes anything else as well. Feeling comfortable and not having that feeling that you're going to be judged and you can really open up. So I appreciate you sharing that. What's the most rewarding part of your job?
I'd say back to this being a relationship business, it's the relationships that I've been able to nurture and grow over the years with my clients. I mean, finances are a really intimate topic when you're talking about money, and being a kind of an extension of my clients' family. I get to see their kids grow up, go to college. I help fund that college through strategies that we have. Help my clients retire and see that next chapter of their life. See my clients get married and combine finances with their spouse. I mean, there's so many at so many aspects of my clients' lives that I'm a part of, from birthday parties to graduations. It's really amazing.
That's really cool because you really have your hands in other people's lives to help them in such a way, right? Where it might be a battle for most people. What's your go-to strategy for overcoming obstacles?
I'm always one that rejection is something that I think earlier in my career was really difficult, and sometimes I would dwell on that or take it personally. I think that with obstacles in business, if you're somebody that's client facing or you're trying to make new clients, it's about just not wasting your time on the people that aren't interested in what you have to say or what you have to offer, but focus on the people that are actually going to prioritize your expertise and utilize it so that they can better their own lives, right?
Yeah. And final question. What's the biggest challenge you faced in your career?
One, I think just understanding as a business grows and evolves, you have to really understand that your day to day is going to change pretty drastically, right? The things that I focused on when I was in the earlier stages of my career are completely different than what I'm focusing on now when I have a full team that I'm managing, staff, and also working with clients directly. The whole business management side of things really change when you're working kind of for somebody or have a manager versus actually from the top down, making sure a business operates the right way.
I appreciate you walking through those. I think there's such valuable information in the answers that you delivered. And I know it's also a quick fire round, so it's short and concise. I'm sure we could have elaborated more, but that was really awesome. So thank you for sharing your wisdom there. But Tori, now if you can, just walk us through a summary of your career so the listeners can get a better understanding of where you started until where you are today.
5 days after college at UC Santa Barbara, I was already hired at a company called First Investors Corporation in Pasadena, California. And I started there 100% commissions, no salary. I actually had to pay to get licensed, and then they would reimburse you once you did a certain amount of revenue. And I worked there. I got all of my license federally as well as through the state and many other states to provide investment insurance advice. And I started with 0 clients and started hitting the phones, making clients organically. And as I grew, my book of business, eventually I got to the place, it was honestly 3.5 years in. Essentially, I was one of the top 10 percent in the company nationwide from a production standpoint. And it was time to make a transition. So I ended up, taking the leap to become independent and start my own firm. And then from there, started to continue, making clients, continue to build my business, but start bringing other experienced advisors onto my team. And that's where I started managing advisors, opened up, our own office space. And then from there, at this point, fast forward, 5, 6, well, call it 10 years now. Time flies, right? Jeez. We have multiple offices. I have a team of advisors, and I'm actually acquiring, advisors' practices where they're retiring. So I'll buy their business, service their clients. So we're continuing to grow organically, but also through mergers and acquisitions.
That is phenomenal. I really appreciate you taking the time to walk through that because it's always very interesting to see where somebody has started to see where they are today. And there's so many different challenges and obstacles that we all go through, but it's very powerful to hear that we all started out in a similar way, although we went through different challenges, right? So one question I'd like to touch on that stemmed from what you just mentioned was, you got your first job, right, at First Investors Corporation 5 days after you got out of college. How did you go about doing that? Like, would you walk through that process? Did you go out and hustle and try and connect and build relationships? Or were you just submitting resumes, et cetera? Like, what did that look like?
Yeah, actually at UCSB or UC Santa Barbara, they had a career fair. And I was in the place where I was a psychology major, and that's not really something that you can get a job to pay the bills straight out of college. But I wanted to go to business school eventually, so I decided, hey, I looked through the career fair before I got there. I looked at all the companies and saw First Investors was going to be there. read all the background about it, did research, walked up to that table when I got to the fair and said, "Hey, I was really looking at your guys' company, really interested. I think that, could be a really good fit. And I think that I could be really successful working for you guys. Would love an opportunity to chat more." And, the manager that was there, I had no idea who he was. And he kind of rolled his eyes and was like, "Oh yeah, what do you know about this company?" And I threw out, that when they were founded, that they're nationwide, the clients that they serve, how they serve their clients from an investment management standpoint. And he was really impressed that I did my due diligence, and he offered me an interview on the spot. So when I was still in school, he gave me an interview. I drove out to Pasadena from Santa Barbara. I had 3 rounds of interviews, and then ended up being hired before I graduated.
Absolutely incredible. And it just shows that you put in the work, right? You knew that you wanted to go after something. You did your due diligence, like you said, and then that opportunity was set forth before you, and then you just jumped on it, right? Sort of that saying, luck is where preparation meets opportunity, right? Like you were prepared, you were ready, and that opportunity came up, and you just grabbed it, and you were just on point for that. And something that else that's very interesting, you mentioned you studied psychology. So what inspired you to pursue a career in finance?
I think in school, I gravitated towards psychology because it was just so interesting understanding the human brain and, what really motivates people and, what can impact one's behavior. And so I just fell in love with psychology when I was in school, but I knew that I wasn't going to be a therapist. And I didn't want to go get my PhD. And I was fascinated with the finance world, and I was thinking investment banking was going to be the ultimate goal. But knowing that I had a psychology background, I wasn't going to get into a top MBA program straight out of the gate. So doing more research, I understood that 3 years of work experience in an industry business related like finance made a lot of sense. And I honestly didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. But I did know that I wanted to do something in the realm of finance. So I said, you know what? Let me do some research before this career fair. Let me see if I can find an opportunity, because I didn't have a big network back then. And I jumped into it, just fully jumped into it just to see if it was going to work out or not, and gave myself this 3-year plan. I was like, hey, I'm going to stick it out for 3 years, go back to school, or, go to a larger firm. At that point, I didn't even think about going independent and starting my own firm. But over that work experience and the real life experience that I got outside of college, it became much more clear what path I wanted to take from there.
That's very powerful, because once again, you see that application. You applied yourself diligently. Sometimes ultimately where we want to go in life, or the end goal, or where we end up, was not predetermined by us when we were younger, but it fell into place with the determination and the experience we ultimately receive along that path, but it's really great to see that you always prepared, you did your research, your due diligence, and you've just executed, every single step of the way. That's really, really impactful. So kind of changing gears and going back to your first Investors Corporation position, were there challenging parts of starting your career without a salary and only commission?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I was broke. Yeah, when you're broke and you got to eat and you have to figure out how to pay rent. I think that's a big motivating factor, but it created a lot of fear, to be honest, because, can I actually be successful? Can I actually make it to the point where I'm not trying to just get and live off of, commission off of commission, right? And that was where I would sit, when I would go through it with the anxiety, right? And, there's days I would sit there and start scrolling, for jobs, left and right. Oh, this is a nice W-2 9 to 5 with healthcare benefits and a 401k. Like, that sounds really nice when you haven't been able to make a client in a month or so, right? So I think it was more so the fear around it that made it really challenging to have to push through that.
Fear, it can lock people or it can really motivate people. It's kind of either or, but at times there are those hills and valleys when fear is involved. And I'm glad you touched on that, because sometimes in certain industries, that's a lot of the times all that is offered is commission only, and you kind of have to go and make your way and be resilient and, fight for that business. But I feel like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, in the position that you are today, it still helps you to some degree be that underdog who can fight through those moments of adversity, right? Because you were there, no commission, so you know how to push through those intense moments in life. And then to go back to the psychology aspect of it all, how has your educational background in psychology influenced your approach to wealth management?
I could honestly say it's actually influenced my approach in just about every way, especially in today's day and age where technology is so relevant. Technology has just gone through the roof over the last 10, 15 years. And I think that a lot of people forget that we're still working with humans, right? We're still building relationships. And I think being able to nurture those relationships, being able to actively listen to the person or people in front of you, and be able to understand what their priorities are, and then incorporate a plan that is tailored to what they need or what they want. I do that every day, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting to see that there is that aspect of psychology within, it's in everywhere, but I think it's even more so when you are dealing with other people's finances. You will understand potentially the fears they're going through, where their struggling points are, and then how to, position a correct plan almost to help them get further along in life. So sort of one like random question I love to ask guests on the show is, at any given moment in time, how many tabs do you have open on your computer screen?
I hate tabs, but I would say probably around 20. There's a lot of tabs going on. Now, if you talk to my wife, she has like 100 tabs every day, and it drives me nuts.
It's hard. It's like you almost need tab management, and it's a whole like sub language that comes out when you have over 20 or so, because then all you've got are those little favicons that show up and you can't even really see what tab you have. But to your point about how technology is expanding so rapidly, everyone has so many tabs open. And then what apps or technology are you using to simplify or streamline your life?
I think it's more so for my business. I have a CRM, right? Client relationship manager, that have all my workflows in that, I correspond with my team. So we can put tasks in there for each individual on the team to know what they need to accomplish that day. I think that also, with being so busy on the day to day, I want to still, learn. I still want to read. I still want to, gain knowledge and, develop, personally and professionally. So Audible, just having books to listen to when I'm driving, Spotify for different podcasts, and like the Wall Street Journal or Bloomberg. I mean, I think that stuff is just so convenient to be able to continue to learn and grow and stay in the know and stay, with all recent news, because you have to be informed. And I think that figuring out ways to continue to learn while you're on the go is probably one of the most important things for me and how I utilize technology.
Life gets so busy as well. You often hear these folks talk about habit stacking, and I find that very interesting too. Like, you're doing that. I mean, yes, okay, driving is not necessarily a habit, but it's something you have to do on a daily basis. So instead of just aimlessly driving, listen to a podcast. If you're on a treadmill, listen to a podcast versus music, so that you can habit stack and you're getting two things done, sort of killing two birds with one stone. So what are some key skills for the young professionals today that they should develop to succeed in the finance industry?
Yeah. I think I've seen a lot of young professionals who they might learn a product to sell, but they don't even become an expert in the field. Like I was saying before, it's the bar is set. You need to be an expert in your lane first, right? Absorb as much knowledge as you can get, be a sponge so that you really understand, how that product or how that investment, whatever it is, applies in real life situations. And then from there, that's when you go out and start just being uncomfortable, putting yourself out there and start building relationships that you can then have that conversation about to show your expertise, especially as someone who's young, because you need that trust, you need that relationship for them to really hear and understand what you're wanting to, share with them.
I love that you spoke on that because so often I think in life, especially with social media this day and age, people think that things can come to them very easily without spending those 10,000 hours, right, to become that expert and really position themselves. And I almost feel like you can hear it within someone's voice, like even as you're talking here today, you're very calm. You're connected to, your diaphragm, the whole different tonality of things. You know what you're talking about in your industry, in your space, and you come across more confident because you're not having to think about certain things in such a way as maybe someone new in that career or field would do. So one thing that I always feel like students should do, and you've touched on this before, is, build relationships and connect with folks and start kind of networking, but focusing on sort of the work side within finances. What strategies did you use to build your client base early on in your career, especially when, only working on that commission?
It's funny because as I'm talking about, making sure that you're the expert in that field, because in finance, very few people around the country really know how financial planning works, how to properly, manage investments. And they used to see me when I was a 21-year-old and they'd be like, "You're so young. Like, what do you know?" Right. But then what I would do is I would set up educational seminars and then I would go out and present on different, investment topics, financial planning topics. I would come in as the educator, which kind of already created this hierarchy where now I'm the teacher and they're the student, even though they're 40 years older than me, they're learning something from me. And then age went out the window because they already understood that I knew this field. I knew how I could provide value to folks and they saw that too. Right. And so I think, as I prioritize education around the stuff that I am an expert on, to the folks that didn't know or had questions about that they weren't willing to ask, it became a lot easier to, take that next step, engage with them in a meeting where we already had, a level of trust established.
That's so great because it ties into sales even a little bit, right? Which at that time, yes, you're doing, but just in the finance world, but you saw an objection that came along, right? A barrier you would hit maybe time and time again. And you were like, okay, let me flip the script. People don't think I'm educated on finance. So let me educate you first. You eradicate that objection that's in front of you. And then now you can go for the sale and the close because they are getting firsthand the understanding of how experienced you actually are in the space. So that's really cool. So, success changes over time. So somebody that's been in your position, especially finance, how do you define success and how has your definition of that evolved over time?
I think at a young age, in my career, but I think even before my career, my whole goal of success was to be able to provide for my family financially. I grew up with not much, right? And my parents didn't have much. They had me when they were really young, and I saw them scrape everything they had to put shoes on my feet to get me to school. And at the end of the day, I wanted to be in a place where I said, "Hey, success is I can provide for my family and not have to think about money when it comes to the experiences we want to share together or the things I want to be able to do for my future kids." And I feel like once I got to that point, that means that my business has really evolved. And at that point, that's always been the priority and always will be. But I've come to terms that as an entrepreneur, I want to be able to establish a business or businesses that I don't have to have my hands on the day to day. I don't need to be a part of the operations, but it can continue to grow and be successful without me being here, because of the systems and the culture that I've instilled in the business that now other team members, other staff are, nurturing and continuing to, really, really take on for themselves. Right. I think that's really what success means for me now.
It's fascinating how it does evolve over time. Someone that I was once interviewing mentioned that, initially at times some goals can be stemmed from insecurities. And it took me some time to think about it, right? Because, we're like, I got to get in the gym. But ultimately that stems from, I don't feel like I look good or I feel good. So I get back into the gym and start working out. So it's interesting that sometimes those things do come from that, but then they evolve over time and that target changes. But it's really cool that you share that, because I think there are a lot of people that have been in situations such as yourself. And it's great to see that you embodied that underdog rising mentality and you overcame that to change your family's life. But not only that, right? You provide jobs to other folks. So you're helping them as well. But you not only have just changed your family's life, but you've changed your family's future generations' lives, which is very, very impactful. So I appreciate you, working extremely hard and making that change for your family, because it's, it's a blessing. It's really, really cool to see. So are there any common mistakes young professionals tend to make in the finance industry? And is there any way that they can avoid them?
Yeah, I think in finance, there's this conception of, oh, you're in finance, so you must be great at golf. You must be a member at a country club, right? This idea of status, I think for younger professionals, and that if they don't embody this status, then, people won't listen to them or care about what they have to say. I would throw that out the window in the beginning of someone's career. I think that, one, like we talked about before, being the expert in your field, but then really just putting the work, getting your feet on the asphalt and taking it step by step every day and making the calls, putting yourself out there, being uncomfortable, building relationships. Prioritize that over some kind of imaginary status that you think is all of a sudden going to bring business to you, because business isn't going to come to you when you're just starting out. You need to go find it. And I think that that's probably the biggest mistake I've seen, is people just wait for the phone to ring. And they sit there and wait a real long time.
Yeah, nothing in life is going to come to you faster than you going out and getting it. Like, you have to go after it, So you touched on people should become experts. They should increase their knowledge and know the industry or field that they're stepping into. But with this day and age, and there's so much readily available within social media. Are there any resources or areas that you would recommend for folks to go and learn from or within? Let me give you an example. So on YouTube, ton of financial information, right? But everybody and anybody can get on YouTube and post something about, a certain industry or field. So I guess, is there a incorrect area, a way, methodology to learn, and maybe are there some things that folks should avoid?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's also kind of part of the magical aspect of finance, is that there's a million solutions out there. There's a million types of investments, but it's not a one shoe size fits all, right? So, you see all these YouTube videos or presentations online, and they make you feel like this is the route to go for me. This is the only way that makes sense. When the reality is that in your specific situation, that actually might not make any sense, right? I think that, there are some good online resources. There's a website called smartasset.com. It has really useful calculators on all these different topics, from, compounding interest to college savings, from tuition rates and all, like interest rates, who has the highest yielding savings account in the industry right now. It's just a third party site. They don't have any incentive to provide anything but the general knowledge. But, it's all general, right? So how do you learn how it specifically applies to you? that's when you work with a financial professional to really show you, okay, well, you learned all of this stuff, but now let's take this general information and apply it to your specific situation, and what does apply, what doesn't apply. There can be multiple solutions for one person or one business, but which one does make the most sense for your specific situation? That's a whole different story.
So we can start off right in very different positions in our careers, right? You mentioned your background. I'm originally from South Africa, came to the US. I got to learn everything sort of from scratch, at 18 and a half, 19 years old. But finances, there can be good habits and bad habits. When someone with your expertise in the industry, just to kind of give back to the younger generation in this episode, what do you think are the most important financial habits for young professionals to develop?
I think that it goes twofold, because you want to be a wise steward of your own finances. So you want to practice what you preach, right? I think at a very young position in my career, once I had enough money to pay the rent and buy food and enjoy just the basic necessities of life, I wanted to start making sure I was paying myself on a monthly basis, via savings. I wanted to make sure I was building up my savings by just having, and this is how much, I make, on this check. That means a percentage of this is always going to go away to pay myself as a part of the bills. Right. Now, habits for professionals who are trying to work with clients and build their practice. I think that it is always important to be consistent. But what I mean by that is you don't want to waste your time on these large prospects if they already said no, or if they aren't interested. Because I always tell everyone on my team, if you have 10 people in a room, 3 people are always going to work with you. 3 people are never going to work with you, no matter how much you know and how much it makes sense. But then there's 4 people in the room that, based off of the connection, relationship, and the expertise that you're able to present to them, they're on the fence and they're going to choose one way or the other. And those are the people that you want to prioritize. And so it's really about, don't waste your time by dwelling on the no's and dwelling on the what ifs, but keep on moving and focusing on yourself and what you can control.
That's a big point, what you can control. Because so often in life, there are so many elements that are outside of your control that, what you said, you have to let it go, move on, right? And then if you can stay top of mind and they can come back to you, amazing. But sort of know when to release things, right?
Oh, to add one thing on that too, you have to follow through with what you tell people you say you're going to do. I have a client I've worked with for 10 years now. It took 3 years to make this client. And what I promised her was I was going to call her quarterly, every 3 months. And sometimes she didn't answer, and I'd leave a voicemail just to check in, see how she's doing, see if she's ready to have a conversation. And then other times she would answer and she was busy and she just wasn't in the right place. After 3 years, she was finally ready to have that meeting. And so it took 3 years to have the first meeting. It took 1 meeting to have her become my client. 10 years later, here we are, right? And that would have never happened if I didn't follow through with what I promised I said I was going to do.
Absolutely. That is incredible. That a determination, but it's not determination from a selfish perspective, right? Like, you ultimately have in the core, like, you want to help people and you can. It just sometimes you got to pull them out of being scared or nervous. So how did you track that? Was that also in a CRM, or was that at times on pen and paper, phone notifications every quarter for you to call a person? How did you follow through on that? That's impressive.
Yeah, in back then, in the beginning stage of my career, I didn't have a CRM. I actually had a paper agenda, and what I would do is I had it written down in that agenda, calendar, the time and date I was going to give her a call. And I just kept ongoing notes that I would put on that page. And so I could just keep on adding to the notes of last time we talked, what we talked about, where we're at. And then I would just keep on pushing that back, or pushing it forward 3 months from then and transferring those notes.
Outstanding. That is determination. That is finest with 3 years pen and paper, like that's just so fascinating, but it just shows you that will of determination. Earlier on in our conversation, you spoke about rejection, right? As well as sort of fear. What are some tips for college kids and young professionals to stay resilient in the face of rejection or failure?
Yeah, you can't take it personally. I think that's something I learned in the business very quickly, that it is business, right? And not everyone's going to work with you. But for every no you have, there's going to be a yes. And it's a numbers game, right? The more people that you talk to, the more people that you build relationships with, the more that you put yourself out there and become uncomfortable, the more opportunity that you're able to find. And to be honest, I am in a place over the last few years where in the beginning of my career, I never even imagined the things I'd be working on today. I didn't even think, I couldn't even conceptualize, the type of business that I'm doing, or the type of people that I'm working with, or the type of opportunities that are coming, because I didn't know that they were out there. And I wouldn't have known that or figured that out without being uncomfortable, putting myself in rooms that I didn't know anyone, and I was willing to just talk and build relationships and take no for what it is and move on to the next person who is willing to hear what I have to say and who's willing to build a relationship with me. And that typically is followed with a yes, right? But you just can't take it personally. It's not on you. You might be able to reflect back on some meetings and say, I messed up, and you just have to learn from that. You can't move, you can't put time back, but what you can do is learn from it and become better the next time an opportunity like that comes.
It's amazing to see how you just constantly kept putting one foot in front of the other. You just kept going, right? You've heard no's, you had some failures, but you just kept pushing through it. And then secondly, it's just incredible to see that you had a level of self-reflection. You didn't just, like, when you hit failure or you got that no, you didn't just put it to the side and then move on with life. Like, to some degree, of course you do, but then, you were able to identify like what happened within that situation or that conversation so I can avoid it next time. Kind of going back to the part where you're talking about objection, and then you kind of just sort of went and educated folks first. So you learned from the past in order to improve the future, which is really, really cool, right? Even though in that moment we might not even realize it, it's always good to look back. So sort of as we round out here, like, what advice would you give to someone who is struggling to find their career path, right? Because we've all been there. We don't know whether we want to go this way or that way. It's hard enough trying to identify what we actually want to study in college, and then you got to go and choose a career.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's hard. Like I was saying before, I had no idea really what I wanted to do. I changed my major 3 times in college. I changed what I thought my career path was going to look like, 20 times before I got that first opportunity. I think that, you have to, one, cast a wide net, be open to a lot of different experiences. I had an internship in college at a law firm, figured out that wasn't my path, right? I had an internship with a sports agent. Very interesting, but really found out that wasn't my path. And then from there, I saw things that I was really interested in that I started to get gravitated towards. And I just had to trust my intuition and trust myself and allow myself to be uncomfortable and just go for it. And at the end of the day, the worst thing that could happen is that I learned that it wasn't for me. And the best thing that could happen is, well, we're sitting here talking right now, right? So I think that that's the way to go, is like, you just have to trust yourself, and you have to be willing to be uncomfortable and try as much as you can and gravitate, trust that subject or that topic or that career path that you're gravitated towards, and dedicate 110% of yourself to it. Don't allow yourself to really get in front of yourself as an objection, right? I think that, if you have fear that puts yourself in a place that it's stopping you from being successful, and you're not blaming it on, it can't be blamed on anything but yourself, then what can you do? But if you put 110% into it and it doesn't work out, or you end up not enjoying it, Well, you thoroughly tried it, and now you know you can move on to something else. And then during that process, you might even find some other aspect of finance or a different industry that you're actually become more interested in. Go for it, right?
And you also ultimately, at the end of the day, won't have any regret, because you did give it your all, and there is no excuse as to why it failed. Because I always feel like, as if when we look backwards on our lives, you can sort of, every area that went wrong or we failed, you can almost point it back to yourself, right? Like, did I spend enough time? Did I follow up correctly? Or, did I spend enough time applying to X amount of jobs? And it's a hard thing to reflect on, but I also think that you touched on trusting yourself. That is the biggest thing, because so many times there are, older generations that inadvertently the younger generations will feel pressure from to do X, Y, or Z, but you are built differently. You need to go out there and define your own path and trust yourself that you can. And if you feel it, go for it and give it your 110%.
100%. And I will say, I mentioned earlier in the beginning stages of my career, there was days where I would just start scrolling through those job posts. I was like, oh, this looks safe. This looks like something I might be able to do. As soon as I stopped doing that, and I really made the decision that I'm just going to put 100% of my mental fortitude into this and all of my effort, and not look behind me, but just continue looking forward. That's actually when I started to see the success that I was trying to reach,
Wow. Absolutely. I love that, because you have to. What is that age old saying? You got to burn all your bridges, right? Or burn all your boats, or whatever the situation is. But it is, because sometimes there's so much opportunity on the other side of fear. Like, you just have to push yourself and get past it, and it's just wonderful to see that you are helping so many other people out there. And I just appreciate you spending time with us, sharing your knowledge and your wisdom with the audience today, because there is so much that we can give back to the younger generation. As it's always better to, a wise man learns from another man's mistakes. We'll clear that path for them, and then they can come walk it behind us. So I really appreciate your time there, Tori. Is there any sort of final last words that you would like to share? One thing I also like to do is, is there a place that folks can, engage and sort of reach out and connect with you if they're interested in doing so?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that, as someone in the younger generation with so much technology, so much social media, just so much coming at you all the time, it's really easy to compare yourself to the world, essentially. And don't do that. Focus on yourself, get to know yourself, and try to be better every day. Try to improve in something every day. And the more that you do that, the more you're going to see success in whatever track you take in life when it comes to your career path or starting a business, whatever it might be. And, people that want to connect with me, we have social media, we have LinkedIn, we have Instagram. I have my website, cognitivewealthmanagement.com. You can always reach out, ask a question. I'm always here to help.
Awesome. Thank you, Tori. It has been exceptional.